Welcome to the final episode in season 2 of Strenuous Conversations. We're going to be talking about the final section of the poem The Hound of Heaven by Francis Thompson. Now of that long pursuit comes on at length the brute. Now of that long pursuit comes on at length the brute. That voice is round me like a bursting sea. If we remember in the last section, he had kind of stopped running. And it stopped running and was waiting by love's uplifted stroke. And he goes into this very long digression, these series of rapid fire images, describing what he's feeling, what he's thinking as he's waiting for the hound that he's been running from to overtake him. And in the beginning of this section, it finally does. Of that long pursuit comes on at length the brute. That voice is round me like a bursting sea. When I hear this line, when I say this line, I think of a bursting sea. I think of the video of the lighthouse, or a sailor on the prow of a ship when they go down into the wave, and the wave just splits around the bow of the ship and washes over everything, or crashes into that lighthouse and just engulfs everything, wraps around it. That was a very short minute. What does the voice say? Is thy earth so marred, shattered in shard on shard? Forearm is fired up today. Hurts like a son again. That is thy earth so marred, shattered in shard on shard. In modern, to moderns, that has one meaning. We think of it as the earth, meaning the world. So when we say is the earth so marred, shattered in shard on shard, think of the whole world being broken apart. But in 19th century England, that would have had another meaning. See, at that time, fox hunting was the sport of the aristocracy, of the gentry. And in fox hunting, the word earth refers to a shallow burrow that the fox scrabbles into a bank. So the fox is running from the hounds, reaches a soft sandy or clay bank where it can just dig as fast as it can with its little front paws and burrow into that bank. It's not a burrow specifically, as in it's not the place where the fox lives and raises its young and has its nest. It's just, it's the fox's equivalent of a hasty fighting position. And incidentally, this is where the term foxhole comes from. So a foxhole is not a prepared fighting position where you have bunker walls that you've built up over time and overhead cover and sandbags. It's just a quick hole in the ground that you dig so you can hide in it. And at the time, this was called the earth, the fox's earth. So they would say, he's gone to earth. And when the earth is shattered, that means that the hounds have found this shallow hole and broken into it. So a little piece of trivia there for you. What does the hound say to him? Is thy earth so marred, shattered and shard on shard? Lo, all things fly thee, for thou fliest me. Strange, piteous, futile thing. Lo, all things fly thee, for thou fliest me. There's that wonderful line from the very first part of the poem. Actually, I think it's the second section. For well I knew, though I knew his love who followed, yet was I sore adread lest having him I must have naught beside. And then this is the line from the second to last section. Is thy love indeed a weed, albeit an amaranthine weed, suffering no flowers except its own to mount? This recurring theme of Thompson's fear that if he gives in and accepts the love of God, is that going to drive all human love away from him? But when you look at his life, you wonder, why are we even worrying about this? That's kind of a moot point. You've already driven all human love away from you. Or human love has been denied you, one or the other. You could almost say, why are you worried about nobody loving you if you love God? Nobody loves you when you don't love God. Kind of a cruel thing to say, but it's the truth. And Thompson says this about himself. But the reply of God is, lo, all things fly thee, for thou fliest me. It is not God's love that drives away the love of other people. It is precisely our human habit of running away from the love of God that causes human love to run away from us. But he doesn't, the hound, the spirit of God that's been pursuing him, doesn't waste a lot of time explaining. He doesn't provide him examples of his life, of which there were many. It's like, no, these people tried to help you, but you haven't reached out to them. Why? You haven't accepted their help. Why? Because of shame. You could argue all these things, but Thompson's already been over them in the poem. He's already explored all of them. He doesn't need the Spirit. Now that the Spirit is upon him, he doesn't need the Spirit to point out to him all the ways in which he's failed. He's well aware of that. Instead, the Spirit of God throws it out there as a blank statement of fact. Lo, all things fly thee, for thou fliest me. No arguments, no supporting, no examples, just the statement of fact. All things fly thee, for thou fliest me. Almost, and of course it is moment. Or what did you expect? We're out today. I haven't been sleeping well this weekend. There's almost this sense in which the Spirit tells him something he already knows. He just hasn't paid attention to it up until now. Of course, everyone is running from you because you are running from me. The next line, strange, piteous, futile thing, wherefore should any set thee love apart? Seeing none but I make much of naught. He said, this theme of shame is probably, in many ways, the strongest theme in the entire poem. But This feeling that he's unworthy, he's not loved because he's unworthy of love, and he doesn't blame anyone for not loving him. In the stanza about the children, when I talked about the nurses, their nursemaids dragging them away. Don't talk to that homeless bum. He doesn't blame them for it. It's no more than just and right in his eyes. And the Spirit, now that the Spirit has caught up with him, doesn't deny this either. Doesn't say they were wrong not to love you. He said, no. Strange, piteous, futile thing. Wherefore should anyone set thee love apart? Why should they love you? Seeing none but I make much of naught, he said. He doesn't deny, he agrees. You are nothing. Therefore, why should anyone love you? Seeing none but I make much of naught, he said. We moderns, I think, tend to read this line and recoil with horror. Like, how dare you say that anyone is nothing, is not worthy of love? In human relationships, this line, I hear this line echoed all the time in emotionally abusive relationships, in the survivors of emotionally abusive relationships. You can't find anyone else to love you because you're not worthy. I am the only one who will love you. So there's a very powerful and disconcerting flavor to this statement that seeing none but I make much of naught. But we have to remember that Thompson himself was a theologian. If not a theologian in the strict sense of the word, he had nevertheless was more exposed and aware of traditional Catholic theology than almost anyone is these days. Not clenching tight enough. What does it mean to make much of naught? It means to make something out of nothing. Now God, as we know, is the creator. Literally, the one who makes everything out of nothing. How can a human being love nothing? They can't. It's impossible. In order for a human to love, there has to be something there to love. A human love cannot create something out of nothing. Only divine love can do that. One way of putting it is to say that God loves us when we are nothing, and so creates us as something. So the Spirit doesn't say this, seeing none but I make much of naught, as he's not echoing this abusive relationship where nobody can love you because you're unworthy. I am loving you out of the greatness of my heart. Therefore, you better not leave. He's saying this as a statement of ontological reality. It is my love that has created you from nothing. And only my love has the power to do that. There's no other God before me. It's not that it's not like God is jealous of our love because he's afraid we'll give it to some other equal but separate entity. There is no equal but separate entity. There is nothing else that can do what God can do, and that is to create something out of nothing. So it is not God who is echoing our abusers. It is our abusers who echo God. And they do it idolatrously, blasphemously. By claiming, arrogating for themselves the right to create someone in their own image. To make of a child of God an object for pleasure, for profit, for the mere thrill of control, whatever the case may be. The moment a human being says this line, "No one but I will love you. Nobody but I can love you." At that moment, he or she is setting himself up as an idol, an opposition to God. Seeing none but I make much of naught, he said, and human love needs human meriting. How hast thou merited of all men's clotted clay the dingiest clot? Or we can put the emphasis a little differently and say, how hast thou merited of all men's clotted clay the dingiest clot? Oh, oops, wrong exercise. Starting to slip a little bit. You've got to be kidding me. How hast thou merited of all men's clotted clay the dingiest clot? Don't expect more from human love than human love can give. Human love cannot love unconditionally. Why and they? I'm sucking this morning. Human love needs human meriting. Again, we remember Thompson doesn't blame anyone for not loving him. There's no reproach in this poem, at least as I read it. There's no reproachfulness against the people who have not loved him. He doesn't blame them. He agrees he's not worthy of love. Not because of himself, but the Spirit points out, not because of himself is he not worthy of love, but he's asking of human love something that it's not capable of giving. He's asking of human love the capacity to love nothing, to love an empty, bottomless pit of need. Human love can't do this. It runs dry. It can try for a little while, but the need is always greater than human love can supply. The Spirit reminds him, how hast thou merited of all men's clotted clay the dingiest clot? And there's many ways to read this line, if I don't throw up. Of all men's clotted clay, the dingiest clot. Last set. The harsh truth that the Spirit imparts is, you're absolutely right. You are not in yourself worthy of love. You cannot deserve it. Of all men's clotted clay, the dingiest clot. Clotted clay. What is clotted clay? It's clay that's been brought together, formed into a shape, and dried, or somehow solidified in that shape. This, of course, is a reference to Genesis. And the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the earth. But What exactly is the Spirit referring to as clotted clay? Is it human love? The love that Thompson's been searching for this whole time? Is that the clotted clay? That could make some sense. How have you merited, of all men's clotted clay, of all possible human loves, how have you merited even the dingiest clot, even the most worthless form of human love? How have you merited it? What have you done to be worthy of it? Or conversely, we could say clotted clay is not human love, but human beings themselves. And we could read it that way. How hast thou merited, of all men's clotted clay, of all the dust and nothing that is human beings, how hast thou merited it? You, the dustiest and dingiest of all of them. I think both readings are permissible and both readings are valuable. Because human love is an inescapable dimension of being human. As John Paul II said, mankind was made for love. Man is made for love. He is incomprehensible to himself unless he is formed by love, unless he enters into the mystery of love. So to read this in both ways, to say the phrase clotted clay means, could refer to either the human beings or human love. I think either way is permissible, and probably Thompson meant both of them. One of the wonderful things about poetry is that you can say two different things at once, that two different meanings that either highlight one another or complement one another, or paradoxically throw each other into relief. You can say both of them at once with the same phrase. But moving on, the Spirit then again asks, whom wilt thou find to love ignoble thee, save me, save only me? We're moving past this desire for human love with this line. It's like, give up your grasping after something that cannot save you. It's not that human love is worthless. It's that it doesn't have its worth within itself. It doesn't get its worth from its own substance. It gets its worth from the divine love of the Creator who creates it. So when you seek human love outside of the divine love, you are essentially seeking after clotted clay. Now remember in Genesis what makes the human being. God formed out of the dust of the earth a man and breathed into him the breath of life. And what is the breath? The breath is almost always, I won't say almost always, because some scripture scholar is going to call me out on it. Breath is very often a metaphor for the Spirit of God that was hovering over the waters. The Spirit of God that Jesus breathed into his apostles. Receive the Holy Spirit, whose sins you've forgiven them. Are forgiven them. The mighty wind, the Spirit, when Jesus talks to Nicodemus, the Spirit blows where it will, the wind blows where it wills, and you cannot say whether it goes or whence it comes. So the clotted clay by itself is nothing. It's not capable of love because it is lacking this breath of God. And this is what I get for eating so much birthday cake yesterday. Ugh. I feel like a slug, a fat, lazy slug. So the breath of God. Whom wilt thou find to love ignoble thee, save me, save only me? So he kind of ends this theme here of forget running after human love. My love is the only thing that can save you. is the only thing that can essentially create you out of nothing, out of the nothing that you realize you are. All that I took from thee, I did but take, not for thy harms, but just that thou might seek it in my arms. This is a pretty point-blank explanation of the question of why is God doing this to me. God's doing it. In one sense, God is not doing it. You're doing it to yourself because we always pursue lesser goods and run from the greater good. But the lesser goods derive their good from this greater good. So as we separate ourselves from the greatest good that is God, we automatically separate everything that we're pursuing from the source of the reason we pursue them. But in the other sense, God is not a passive force who just kind of sets things in motion and then allows karma to do the trick. God is a person who responds, who takes initiative and reaches out to make things happen in order to draw us back to himself. And one of the things that he makes happen is he takes away these lesser goods. He's, you're pursuing drugs instead of me. Well, I'm going to take those drugs away from you. Not in the sense that I'm going to keep you from using them, because that would violate your free will, but I am going to so ordain the nature of these drugs that the pleasure of using them becomes less and less over time, until the point where you will find that you get no pleasure from it, but you still need them. You're chasing after human beings instead of me. Ultimately, this is going to destroy you. But before I let it get to that point, I'm going to take away these other human beings by making, not by directly killing them or removing them from your life, but by so ordaining human relationships that when they are not based on divine love in some way, they become less and less satisfying. They lose their power to fill that hunger in your soul. That's just how he's going to design their nature. And he does this on purpose. He doesn't mess around and say, no, it's just kind of how things are. Of course it's how things are. It's how things are because he created them that way for the purpose of taking away from us everything that would stand between us and him, because in the end, he is the only true good. All which I took from thee, I did but take, not for thy harms, but just that thou might seek it in my arms. So when everything is taken away, he wants us to return to him. All which thy child's mistake fancies as lost, I have stored for thee at home. So he changes the analogy ever so slightly. Now, the things that you've been pursuing, they're not bad things. They're toys. They're things that children run after. They're little toys and trinkets and baubles that are not bad. They're good things in themselves, but they are not what the child really needs. What the child really needs is to come home to the Father who loves them. Thing still isn't completely healed yet because it's being lazy and stupid. All which thy child's mistake fancies as lost, I have stored for thee at home. Arise, clasp my hand and come. The Spirit speaks only a very few lines at the end of the poem. Up until now, it's been, naught contents thee who contents not me. All things betray thee, for thou betrayest me. It's kind of like an I told you so, what did you expect kind of moments. Until finally Thompson stops running exhausted and surrenders, gives up. Naked I wait by love's uplifted stroke. Do whatever you want. And what does the Spirit want to do? None but I make much of naught. Whom wilt thou find to love ignoble thee, save me? All which thy child's mistake fancies as lost, I have stored for thee at home. Arise, clasp my hand, and come. And then we go back to the voice of Thompson. Halts by me that footfall. Is my gloom, after all, shade of his hand outstretched caressingly? There's this moment when he comes to realize that what he was running from was the caress, the embrace, the touch of love. So Thompson's been going through life as a leper, simultaneously desiring and yet driving away love. So it's kind of like in the Bible, I guess the lepers cry out, unclean, unclean, and they ring a bell and they drive everyone away from them. But at the same time, they desire human touch and human affection and this love that comes to us from, or rather through, other human beings. And they find this love in the Gospels. They find this love in Jesus. It's like, teacher, if you will, you can make me clean. Jesus says, I do so will it. Be made clean. He reaches out and touches. The Mosaic covenant, where the lepers are ritually unclean and people are not allowed to touch them. We like to think of that as God imposing this harsh ostracism of people with disease. But I don't think that was actually the case. I think that ostracism of people with disease is a perennial human trait. We see other people who are dirty, and we are either so dirty ourselves that we don't care, or we are afraid that their dirt will rub off on us and ruin our cleanness. And neither one of these is a healthy attitude, where we're just all dirty and all okay being dirty. That's not a healthy attitude. Or I'm clean and I don't want your dirt to rub off on me. That's a little more healthy because it somehow values cleanliness, but still not a good attitude because it condemns this other person to wallow in dirt. But the point of this law is that until God comes with a radically different kind of cleanliness, a radically different kind of purity, that is exactly what's going to happen. You're going to mix with somebody who is dirty and you are going to get dirty, because the cleanliness that we possess is at best a negative thing. It's simply the absence of dirt. But God's cleanliness, God's purity is a positive purity, a positive cleanliness that blasts away dirt. It's the cleanliness that comes in and removes the dirt off of everything it touches. So when Thompson feels himself to be this leper and people see him and they walk away, they turn the other way, he doesn't blame them because he knows that, or he's afraid that if these clean people touch him, he will somehow contaminate them. But God can touch him, and instead of, he can't contaminate God. God instead touches him and makes him pure, actually removes the dirt and the uncleanness from him. So it is this caress, this hand outstretched for a loving touch, that is what Thompson has been running away from. Is my gloom, after all, shade of his hand outstretched caressingly? So he was thinking this was darkness coming at him, but it's just a shadow of a hand that's reaching out to touch him, to lift him up, to make him clean. And he ends the poem with these lines of the Spirit. Fondest, blindest, weakest, most loved, most unseeing, most incapable. most non-potent, most impotent. These are things that Thompson reproaches himself for being so sensitive, and I think in the modern phrase, we probably expect him to be, in modern society, we probably expect Thompson to be gay because he was so sensitive. So unseeing, like he doesn't see all the truth. Fondest, blindest, weakest. These are things that Thompson reproaches himself for being so fondest, so sensitive. He feels everything, he loves everything so sharply that this love becomes a path to hurt him. And he reproaches himself for that, I think. Blindest, he just doesn't see what's right behind him, right before his eyes, something that he should have seen all this time, he just doesn't see it. Weakest, he can't lift himself up. Probably his greatest self-reproach, he can't raise himself up out of this mire that he's stuck in. But to the Spirit, these are not things that he's reproaching him for, these are terms of endearment. Fondest, blindest, weakest. I am he whom thou seekest. Thou dravest love from thee when thou dravest me. And nobody ever uses the word drave as the past tense of drive anymore. Nobody does that. But Thompson does, and he gets away with it because it just flows. His ability to find the perfect word, however archaic it might be, and to use it in a way that nobody can miss the meaning, and yet it doesn't sound like he's being archaic just for the sake of being archaic, is truly astounding. I think possibly T.S. Eliot might rival that ability, but Thompson was certainly, I think, very unique in that ability to see the entire English language and all its history as a single unified whole, and to take the precise word that he needed from any point in that history and use it appropriately. Little poetic digression there. I am he whom thou seekest, thou dravest love from thee when thou dravest me. I mean, he doesn't answer whether or not he reaches out and he actually does come to the Spirit. And I think the reason for that is, one, it would be kind of an anticlimax. Two, it would take the focus of the poem away from where he was trying to put it. The whole front 90% of the poem is his experience of running. The story, he is the center of the story. The story is all about him. But at the end, these last few lines, we turn around and we flip the story around, and we see that the story has actually been all along about the Spirit chasing him, about what the Spirit has done to come after him, to find him, to bring him back. It's the Spirit's action that is the point of it, not only for Thompson, but for us who are reading this poem and learning from it. That's where he leaves it, because the third reasoning, because that invitation is not just for him, it is for us as well. At every point in our life, especially when we're at our darkest and lowest, there's the Spirit right there over our shoulder saying, I am he whom thou seekest. You are driving love from yourself when you drive me away. And then just stands there and holds out his hand. I'm waiting. Like, nothing you can do will make me take this hand away. It's always here, always waiting for you. You just have to reach up and take it. And with that, Thompson ends the poem, and I end this season of Strenuous Conversations. I hope you enjoyed it, maybe got something out of it, at least a good workout if you've been following along with those. Let this be a lesson, let today's workout be a lesson to you. And once you get on the keto and intermittent fasting bandwagon, don't jump off of it and then expect not to have consequences the next morning. Hope you enjoyed the series. I will be starting work on season 3 momentarily, but I have to do a lot more research for that. So until then, until next time, see you later.